Sup fellow new kids, this is F Meister 94 with my review of South Park Season 22, Episode 5, The Scoots. Please note two things. This is my personal opinion, and obviously there will be spoilers. With that said, let's get down to the review. Let me start by saying I really enjoyed this episode. Like with Father Mackey, Mr. Hanky, Towley, and arguably Sharon, Mr. Mackey and Kenny get much needed screen time in this episode. The episode takes a hilarious jibe at Halloween hysteria, throwing in a rent-a-scooter service, trick-or-treating, bad scooting, and a candy shortage, all to chaotic hilarity, making for such a fun watch. Now let's get into the episode. So the episode has two plots. The A plot, Mr. Mackey is perplexed by all the scooters lying around, and after getting fed up of all the scooters crashing into his car, he tries to get rid of them to no avail. And with word of kids using them to trick or treat, how is he going to protect his house after running out of candy? The B plot, Kenny and his friends find scooters lying around that they can rent with their phones, but Kenny has no phone. So when his friends get the bright idea to use them to trick or treat faster, they tell him he can't trick or treat with them. But everybody has got the same idea. So, what can he do? So, he decides to seek counsel. Now, let's get into how I'm going to structure this video. So, firstly, I'm going to discuss plot A, then my thoughts, then plot B, then my thoughts, then my conclusion, then my thoughts on that, and I'll end with a score. So let's start off with plot A. So the episode starts with an introduction from the narrator, a kid from South Park from the future, with a scene of the people from South Park preparing for Halloween, kids playing, falling leaves. Mr. Mackey is taking out the garbage when he trips over a scooter, just lying nearby his garbage bin. Mr. Mackey is pissed off, somebody just left their scooter lying around, to which the guy opposite him informs him it is an e-scooter that anyone can use. You just ride it when you need it and leave it for the next person to use. Mr. Mackey asks who is responsible for this, to which he tells him nobody knows. Mr. Mackey drives to the candy store called Lolly's Candy Factory and is shocked to see even more scooters outside the shop. Mackey makes his Halloween order and asks what the deal with the scooters is. The clerk asks, does he have a problem with scooters? To which Mackey responds that, he thinks scooters, that scooters shouldn't be used, people should be driving instead. Mr. Mackey walks out the door and is surprised to see that the number of scooters has multiplied. Mr. Mackey is driving his car and he is singing away when he gets distracted by the scooters passing by. When Mackey nearly knocks over a scooterist crossing on a red light, scooterists drive into him on both sides. Then Mackey has to weave through dozens of scooterists. Mackey creeps through South Park, picking up every single e-scooter and tossing them into the back of his pickup truck, even tying them to each other and scooting them to his truck. Then he drives to a remote cliff and just pushes the pile of scooters out of the pickup truck. Mr. Mackey wakes up from his phone alarm going off. When he puts on his glasses, he realizes there are scooters by his bed. Mackey then retreats to the bathroom, but there are scooters there as well. Then he hears someone or something bump into the steps outside. He opens the door to see a scooterist. He doesn't seem to get a break, does he? So Mackey asks when he gets where he actually got that. First planned to be dashed when the guy reveals they are still everywhere. The narrator tells the audience, their parents are holding a meeting to stop a nightmare from coming true. The detective tells the townspeople they have a crisis on their hands with the rise of e-scooters, and leaves the head of crisis control, Officer Brown, to explain. So Officer Brown explains that, all the kids are using e-scooters to cover more ground for trick-or-treats. And they expect kids from neighbouring towns to be doing the same. The detective adds that they'll need to buy $6,000 worth of candy. Steam responds that they can't all buy that much, and suggests that they get rid of the e-scooters. Mackey stands up and tells them, they can't, as he already tried and failed. That is their own fault for scooting instead of driving, and says, he's not going to let his house get egged. So asks everyone, what are they going to do? The townspeople are left with the conclusion that they must buy more candy and stampede out the door, to which Mackey quickly follows. Mackey rushes to Lolly's candy factory, but he is practically out of stock. The clerk tells him, he's out of candy. Mackey points out that there are still some left. The clerk tells him that some of it has actually been reserved by other people, and that he also needs to have some to protect his own house. Mackey pleads to the clerk, but the clerk cocks and points his gun in Mackey's face, telling him to leave. Mackey rushes to the supermarket, but when he gets to the candy, all there is left is 2 bodies, empty boxes, and collapsed shelves. As for my thoughts on Plot A, I really liked seeing Mr. Mackey get some much needed screen time. I really like his character. As the voice of reason, having him being the protagonist is a perfect choice. Especially with his way of speaking, it makes for such great comedy. Also, the scene of him trying to get rid of the scooters during night is absolutely stunning. The background art of the night sky was absolutely gorgeous. I can't get enough of it. Honestly, I'd repeat watching it for that particular reason. Also, the people of South Park are absolutely terrible at driving e-scooters. Seriously, keep them away from e-scooters. They're a danger to themselves and danger to everyone around them. Don't know why, but just the aftermath of the rampaging mobs with that shopping music or kind of waiting music, whenever they have that, it just always cracks me up. And it's also a case of essentially not needing to kind of show us what exactly happened, but honestly showing us the aftermath of it. It just really, it's a case of the less the better. And it just makes for such great dark comedy, and I find those scenes are just so much more powerful and hilarious. Now let's get into Plot B. So Stan, Kyle, Kenny and Carmen are standing around the scooter checking it out. When Carmen comments that they work with your smartphone, Stan tests it out, but it requires credit card information. So Carmen obliges and gives Stan Leanne's credit card information. Stan takes it on a test run when Kyle comes up with the bright idea to use scooters to cover more houses on their trick-or-treat run. But the problem is Kenny doesn't have a phone. But Kyle reassures Kenny that, they'll figure something out. Kenny comes out of the Halloween outlet store with a pumpkin pail and walks to Carmen's house, keen to show Carmen when he arrives. Carmen invites him in, where Stan and Kyle try to gently break it to Kenny that, they don't want to trick or treat with him because, he will slow them down because he doesn't have a phone to use the scooter. Carmen naturally has no tact, telling Kenny it is his own fault for choosing to be poor. So he needs to find someone else to trick or treat with. Kenny tries pleading, but Stan, tells him that their plan to get a shitload of candy doesn't work with him. So Kenny walks out of the door. Jimmy, Butters and Token are at Clyde's house where the 4 of them are plotting their plans for trick-or-treating. Clyde is telling the group that as soon as the bell rings, that they're going to take the scooters where they are going to start trick-or-treating at Butters' neighbourhood. Then Clyde gets interrupted by a knock. Clyde answers and is met with Kenny at the door. Kenny asks, if he can trick or treat with them, and Clyde asks, why is he not trick or treating with Carmen, Kyle, and Stan? To which Kenny gives a muffled response. Clyde levels with Kenny. He can't because they're using e-scooters and Kenny doesn't have a phone. Kenny pleads, but Clyde tells him, it's trick-or-treating and, it's not something he's willing to mess around with, and wishes him good luck. Clyde closes the door then. Kenny sits at the girls', which is Wendy, Baby's and, company's table at recess, to their confusion, where he asks them, if he can trick-or-treat with them. Wendy asks why, and Kenny tells them because, they're better at trick-or-treating than the guys. Carmen's group and Clyde's group are sitting opposite each other, both adamant that they're going to get more candy than the other. Carmen lets loose that they got a plan, but Stan says that they're not going to tell them because they don't want them to copy. Clyde's fine with that when he asks what they are going to be for Halloween, because Carmen can't resist. He ends up blurting out that they'll be on scooters taking all their candy. Then Jimmy admits that, that's what they're going to do. Then Craig, then Wendy, then everybody. With a cacophony of basically people thinking that the others stole their idea. Kenny realizes, he's not going to be able to trick-or-treat with anyone this year and walks away. It is Halloween day and the kids are sitting in class waiting for the bell, anticipating, the shitload of candy they're going to get using their e-scooters. Of course, it's still the morning, so there's many hours left. During which Kenny goes to the counsellor's office. As for my thoughts on plot B, I love that Kenny, who is in my opinion the most neglected character in the series, finally gets an episode. For a main character, 3 seasons is way too long. Honestly, no character deserves it more. I really like the idea that the kids would think up of, using the e-scooters to cover more ground for trick-or-treating. But by Stan, Carmen and Kyle taking it way too far when they tell Kenny he can't go with them because, he'll just slow them down because he doesn't have a phone to use the scooter. Of course, you do expect Carmen to tell Kenny, he can only blame himself. But when Stan tells Kenny their plan doesn't work with him, it just feels exceptionally harsh. I feel so sorry for Kenny this episode. Especially, as he asked other people if he could trick-or-treat with them, only to learn that they themselves are thinking of doing the same thing. As much as you feel really bad for him, it just really plays off as just so darkly hilarious. I especially like how everyone, finds out the plan because, Carmen couldn't keep his mouth shut and had to gloat. Probably my favourite part of the episode was the reference to South Park Phone Destroyer with Mecha Timmy, which also just served as a sting because Mecha Timmy was about to be nerfed and he now is actually nerfed. But yeah, they had to put him in an episode and it just stung so badly, but it was brilliant. When Kenny went to see Mr. Mackey, the two plots converge. So, on to the conclusion. Now let's get into the conclusion. So, Mr. Mackey is counting his candy supply when Kenny knocks on the door. And Mackey tells him to come in. Mackey asks him, why he came to the office, and Kenny starts talking about his problem, that he can't scoot because because they're using scooters. And Mackey is surprised, he came to the office for counselling. Mr. Mackey tells him he should consider himself lucky as everyone will be out scooting. And there's going to be utter chaos. Mackey asks him, why he's the only one not scooting, when Kenny tells him he can't use them because he doesn't have a phone. This makes Mackey think, if there is a way they can cut the connection, maybe they can stop scooters. And so Kenny gets the idea of, if the cell tower is out, nobody will be able to scoot for Halloween. But remember, he can't do that because he doesn't have a phone. But Mackey reassures him that he doesn't need a phone because he has a car. The Stotches visit the Marshes at Tegrity Farm, asking if they can stay with them during Halloween because they haven't seen them for a long time since they moved. Randy isn't buying it, knowing that they just want to escape the trick-or-treaters. But he tells them, they'll be getting trick-or-treaters as well. Stephen asks, if they're not going to let them stay, at least give them some candy to tide them over. Randy tells him he needs to protect his own stotch. When they get back into the car, Linda starts panicking. Stephen reassures her that he will trick or treat. Linda panics even more at the thought of him leaving her alone, but he reassures her that he will bring back candy for them to give out. The bell rings and the kids rush out, scrambling to secure a scooter before the other. The streets are washed with trick-or-treaters on scooters. There's an echo of like trick-or-treat from thousands of kids or hundreds of kids, whatever. You know, how many there was. It's a crazy number. I have no idea how much kids were actually there. So the parents are forced to toss a handful of candy as each kid passed by. Kyle is shocked there are so many people around. Cartman reminds them they need to get more candy than everyone else, even if they die. Trick-or-treaters are coming into South Park, and Mackey and Kenny are wading through them in their car. Mackey asks, Kenny, what gives some big company the right to dump a load of scooters in their town without asking? Kenny mumbles an incoherent response, to which Mackey agrees. Then Mackey tells Kenny, he's a good kid, and though the town forgets about him sometimes, he is smart and compassionate, and he could make a good counsellor someday. Ned and Jimbo are chucking out candy for the trick-or-treaters when Stephen comes trick-or-treating, to which they tell him, to get lost. Kyle complains he can't carry anymore, but Cartman tells him, to keep moving. Stan agrees with Kyle, so Cartman comes up with the idea to gorge on some of the candy, for them to all gorge on some of their candy, so there is more room in their sacks. So the boys begin gorging so much that Stan ends up puking. Mackey and Kenny arrive at the cell tower, but they are met with some person in a ski mask wielding a bloodied machete. Jason Voorheen. But yeah, it's not. It's just the security guard in fancy dress. He tells them he's got no more candy. Mackey and Kenny reassure him, they're not trick-or-treaters. The guy is hesitant to believe them. Mackey promises him he will stop the scooters. All he needs to do is take out the tower. Just trust him, because he's a school counsellor. The police station is also under siege from the trick-or-treaters, and there is a news report on saying that New York has run out of candy, and you can see the sheer chaos behind him. So Jimmy and Token just realise they're after losing Butters, and Butters has gorged himself sick, not capable of getting any more candy. Randy and Sharon are on the porch, looking on in fear at the impending doom on the shape of scooters. Kenny climbs up the cell tower and secures the chain around the tower. Mackey puts the pedal to the metal, pulling the tower to the ground, and so the narrator chimes in as the scooters come to a grinding halt. Everybody has no idea what is happening. They can't even text. The commuters can't even order an Uber. It's like the old Halloween. But everything is okay, as Mackey is there to provide counselling. And as you should have guessed already, when Kenny comes onto the scene, the narrator reveals it is he. So, Kenny can now trick-or-treat with his friends as they are equal. Cartman, Kyle and Stan may have done enough trick-or-treating for a lifetime, but Kenny hasn't been trick-or-treating and is sure going to make the most of it. The narrator ends by saying, it was the last Halloween that felt like Halloween and felt good. And then the scooter comes to life and scoots off. As for my thoughts on the conclusion, I loved all the moments between Mackey and Kenny. Like A Boy and a Priest, it had such an adorable adult and kid relationship. Linda and Stephen in moments of chaos always make for hilarious moments. With the sheer chaos and kids needing to gorge themselves, brought my only real gripe about the episode. Like, what was the driving factor for getting more candy? What was the reason for it? And there isn't any true way to gauge who got the most candy because they had to like gorge some of it down, you know. But I did enjoy the sheer chaos, you know, the kids having like, you know, with the parents, you know, having to chuck into the kids' sacks. Stephen trick-or-treating, the aftermath in New York, the echo of trick-or-treat everywhere, people even commuting through South Park to trick-or-treat, you know. It was intense. And I absolutely adored how Mackey's words echoed the audience thoughts pretty much. Mackey's kind words to Kenny just were extremely heartwarming. And maybe Counselor isn't exactly what the audience were thinking would be a good career path for him, but maybe, who knows. I really like Mackey. I really like how Mackey refers to the security guard as Jason and, you know, tells him to trust him. And Jason just like tilts his head. With the mask on, he just really sells the character. And yeah, then after having like an older Kenny narrating was a really nice touch. I like how after he brings down the cell tower, stopping the scooters, you know, he's so enthusiastic to trick-or-treat, and his friends are not so enthusiastic. I found that just absolutely hilarious. Above all, I absolutely adored this episode. A Kenny episode has been so sorely needed. The story was interesting, though there was no drive for the kids to do what they did, and that kind of bothered me. I love that they are keeping a theme of like giving neglected characters screen time and character relationships. And that's something I want to kind of briefly discuss. Either a relationship forms or a relationship changes in some way. So like episode 1, we've got like Randy and Sharon. Episode 2, Father Maxie and Butters. Episode 3, Kyle and Mr. Hanky. Episode 4, Randy and Towley. And episode 5, Kenny and Mr. Mackey. And we can say with stuff like Randy and Sharon and Kyle and Mr. Hanky, there was kind of like a change in like, you know, how they saw each other really. While then with like Father Maxie and Butters, Randy and Towley, and Kenny and Mr. Mackey, you know, characters that never really talked to each other before kind of like build a kind of like a bit of a bond, which I really enjoyed. And this is how to perfectly craft a season, providing us with like, you know, a fairly wide array of character development across their cast and, you know, developing the relationships they have with each other. And it really is turning out to be probably one of my favourite seasons so far. I've learned so much about so many characters, and it's only been 5 episodes. Like, it's only halfway. Jesus Christ, that is pretty incredible. Really, Trey and Matt, they're genius. Keeps on surprising me. So, I give the Scoots a grand score of 9 out of 10. So that's my review or summary of the Scouts, or Scoots. Why do I keep on saying the Scouts? Scoots. The Scoots. I'll be doing another review for the next episode. So if you enjoyed it, let me know by liking this video. I know it's extremely late. As of uploading this video, the episode has already aired in both, I suppose, in both like Eastern, in both the East Coast and the West Coast. Not so much where I'm from, but yeah, because we get it 24 hours later. So I apologize about that, but I will definitely be doing that review fairly soon. I'll try and get it out earlier than I have this week. It won't be a week. It won't be a week late, I'd say. It'll be maybe, hopefully, Monday. Or earlier, preferably. But I'll see. It'll be a lot earlier this time, I'm sure. So anyway, let me know what you guys thought of the episode in the comment section down below. If you guys would like to be notified of when I post my next review, consider subscribing to the channel and ring that notification bell. So until next time, fellow new kids, you take it easy. Goodbye.